Hello everyone, welcome to this week's episode of the CRICKETher Vodcast. We're at Bristol. We're now a week on from finals day in the Charlotte Edwards Cup. Sid, you've kind of got the bragging rights there because you said that it would be the Diamonds who would make it to the final. So I was wrong on that front. However, we did both call the winner correctly, so congratulations to the South East Stars. But we're back to regional cricket today, aren't we? But now we've switched to 50 over, back to the RHF Flint Trophy. We've just watched Storm rather convincingly beat Lightning here at Bristol. So what does that do in terms of the table, Sid?
Well, I'm going to make a big assumption here. I'm going to assume that Diamonds are going to beat Thunder. They look well on course to do so, but that game isn't over yet. Assuming that Diamonds beat Thunder, then that means that Vipers, Diamonds and Sparks are the three teams that will definitely qualify for the next stage. It's still to be decided who will win the ladder and go straight through to the final and who will contest the semi-final, but it's going to be those three teams that will go through, so congratulations to them.
Fantastic. Well, that's going to be exciting, but obviously all still to play for in terms of going directly through to the final. Now, the other thing that we've seen this week is that the New Zealand v England T20 series has wrapped up now, and England did win. So again, Sid, you got the bragging rights, bit of a theme here in this video, because you did call it when we were at Taunton, just ahead of the game, recording that video. You said you thought that England would win, but it was quite a narrow squeak for them, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was a little bit close. I think what we saw overall is that England's very strong batting lineup isn't going to totally collapse three times in a series. New Zealand actually had a little bit of an in, and there were a couple of points where you thought maybe they're going to do this, but at the end of the day, that batting lineup, if you get one, you've got another and another and another coming in. You've got Nat Siver and then Heather Knight and then Amy Jones and then Sophia Dunkley, and to expect that batting lineup to collapse totally three times in the series, as they did in the second match, just wasn't realistic. There was a little bit of a hint in the final over when Amy Satterthwaite took a wicket off the first ball of the final over, but Sophia Dunkley was just never going to let that go. And as soon as Catherine Brunt, dashed a mad single to get her back on strike, and then Dunks just was like, yeah, I can do this, and she did it. But that's not quite all, is it really? It doesn't tell the whole story of the series from England's perspective particularly, does it, Raf?
Yeah, I mean, I do think we've kind of sort of talked about this a bit in the vodcast before, but I do think that England have got problems with their bowling, in particular in T20s at the moment. One thing that happened during that last match, in particular, that obviously New Zealand will take a great amount of satisfaction from, was Sophie Ecclestone bowling the 19th over of the New Zealand innings, getting tonked everywhere by Brooke Halliday, who is very much, she's an exciting prospect, but she's not somebody who we would expect to be taking Sophie Ecclestone for 16 runs off an over. Has that even ever happened before to Ecclestone in T20s?
Certainly it's not something that Sophie Ecclestone expected, judging from her reaction.
And actually, really, one of the issues for England this series has been that Ecclestone has been a bit off the money, and she hasn't been as strong as we've come to expect. She hasn't performed as strongly as we've come to expect from her, and so that's difficult. There were hints, or there was talk in the commentary on the BBC that she'd had conversations with Alex Hartley, who of course is her captain in regional cricket, to say that she felt that she's had soreness in her shoulder, and in particular since she bowled a huge number of overs in the test match against India at the start of the season. I think it was something like 64 in an innings or something ridiculous.
It was across both innings, I think, but it was 64 in a row because they yeah.
So it was an awful lot of overs, especially for somebody who isn't used to playing any multi-day cricket at all. And Hartley basically said, she's not really been right since then. Now, it's true that she has had a bit of a tricky season. She didn't have a great 100. She's not had a great series against New Zealand in the T20s. However, the ECB and the England management have very much poo-pooed any suggestion that there is a problem with her and that she's got anything other than kind of your regulation soreness that any cricketer experiences from time to time. So they've really poo-pooed that and dismissed that as a suggestion. I think that there's an interesting dynamic there going on, because, as I've just said, Alex Hartley is her regional captain, and you would expect her to know what's going on. But, there you go. We don't know what the truth of it is. We're just kind of going by what's out in the public domain. But, whether or not she's got a sore shoulder or whatever, whether there's anything else going on behind the scenes, it's not great for England. And it really has been, their kind of over-reliance on her in T20s with the ball has been exposed, I feel, a little bit this series. New Zealand have been quite dominant with the bat in a couple of the games. Obviously, they were quite rusty in that first one, but I think that that's problematic. And really, England need to try and find a couple more solid bowlers who are in their first choice 11, who are a bit more reliable. I mean, Catherine Brunt has her day. She might have her over or a couple of good balls, but we're not necessarily getting 4 good overs from her every match anymore. I think that Nat Siver is obviously a brilliant batter, but she isn't a T20 specialist bowler, and maybe can't be relied on to bowl 4 overs every game. I don't think that's how I call it anyway. And now England have got this new problem with Anya Shrubsole, who obviously wasn't selected for the first couple of matches of this series, and then appeared on TV during the third match with a kind of what looked to be a moon boot on her foot. So she's had some kind of injury sustained in training, and we don't know how long that might put her out for. So that's another bit of a worry on the horizon. I think that they need to work a bit harder at kind of finding a more settled and more reliable bowling lineup that doesn't over-rely on Sophie Ecclestone, and that's something that really needs to be addressed. We obviously have got the ODIs coming up, so a switch of format. It's been interesting. We saw that the ODI squad was announced yesterday, and actually Charlie Dean has been retained in that squad. Potentially England are looking to therefore have her kind of fill the Maddie Villiers role as a sort of off-spinning all-rounder, Sid?
Yeah, I think that England have treated Maddie Villiers kind of, well, perhaps badly is unfair, but they've never really seemed to have an idea of exactly what her role in the team is. She hasn't bowled many overs recently. There's been most of the games she's played recently, she's only bowled 1 or 2 overs. She's batting well down the order. She's carded to come in at 9 or 10, hasn't actually batted that much because England don't usually, need their 9 or 10 to bat in T20s. And, I think that they have done her a bit of an injustice, frankly. But, Charlie Dean maybe has an opportunity to come in and take that role, possibly. I think that one thing that's probably happened here is that England planned that Charlie Dean would get a cap, would get a match in the T20 series, but then with Heather Knight's injury and then the fact that there was the risk of them losing the series, they kind of got spooked by that and decided not to play her in that last match. So, I think there's a very good chance she's going to play at least one of these matches. Whether she'll play all 5 and really be part of England's plans, I don't know. We'll see, I guess.
Yeah, because we did say that we thought there'd be less opportunity for a new player to break into that ODI side, because Heather Knight had said earlier in the summer that she felt quite convinced and quite confident that she had her kind of 11 for the ODI World Cup next year kind of nailed down. But it's possible that Charlie Dean may break into that squad?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I guess there's beyond Sophie Ecclestone, who for me is the one person that England are definitely going to select in that bowling lineup. I think that there start to be questions about almost everybody else. There start to be questions, that we definitely can't rely on Catherine Brunt's fitness consistently. She'll obviously do her best, and she'll come in even if she's got a broken back. She'll be running in, but obviously, England aren't going to let her do that. Hopefully, and everybody else is like, well, nobody else is bowling particularly well of the people that are currently in possession. So there's an opportunity there for someone to come in, maybe.
Now, turning to a more global issue that's very much been in the news this week, and quite a serious one, really. Actually, we have had now a representative of the Taliban come out this week and say that they will be clamping down on women's cricket in Afghanistan, and women will not be permitted to play cricket. And that has led to Cricket Australia, after quite a bit of soul searching, I think, actually cancelling their very imminent men's test against Afghanistan, which was due to happen in just a few weeks' time. And there's been a lot of debate about this on social media, hasn't there, Sid? And I know that there was a video that was tweeted out earlier today of the very well-respected Australian cricket writer Gideon Haigh, talking about that, and he said that he thought it was a well-meaning but premature response from Cricket Australia. He said, the message I've heard from Afghanistan is please don't turn your back on us, and he says we'd have a better chance of exercising influence over the Taliban in Afghanistan by maintaining links rather than severing them. What do you make of that, Sid?
Honestly, I'm not a young man anymore, and I'm old enough to remember the arguments around the sporting boycott of South Africa in the 1970s and the 1980s, and those kinds of arguments are exactly the same arguments that were being made by people in the 70s and 80s that, as we put it now, were essentially supporting apartheid by arguing that we should continue to maintain sporting links with South Africa. So for me, if you're on the same side today, if you're making the same arguments as the people made that wanted to continue playing in South Africa and against South Africa, people that opposed the boycott of South Africa, people that were, as we see it looking back now, effectively supporting apartheid, if you're making those arguments, you're probably on the wrong side.
Yeah, I know that there's been people saying, oh, well, it's not the same because the South African government actually cared about sporting links and the Taliban won't care so much. What would your response to that be, Sid?
I understand that, but I think the principle remains that, if you're going to have a line in the sand, it needs to be a proper line in the sand, and we need to say, that at some point we're not going to maintain those sporting links exactly as we did with South Africa in the 70s and 80s in the end.
Gideon Haigh also says it's beholden on those making the argument to explain what a policy of exclusion would be accomplishing. And I think that my response to that would be, well, perhaps it won't do anything to kind of change the Taliban's mind. That seems quite unlikely, to be honest, and maybe it will lead to a decline of men's cricket in Afghanistan. But for me, it's partly about a kind of international principle of cricket boards and hopefully in time the ICC, who at the moment are basically saying, oh, well, we're not meeting till November, so we'll have a chat about it then. Obviously, there's no urgency to this issue whatsoever, which is just ridiculous. But anyway, it is beholden on the cricket boards then, if the ICC won't act, to actually, as you say, kind of draw a line in the sand and say, no, we stand for gender equality and we're not prepared to countenance playing international cricket against a country that won't even make kind of token or even make any moves towards setting up a women's team and towards supporting women's cricket. There was a really good piece in the Telegraph this week by Izzy Westbury basically saying exactly that, wasn't there? And I'd urge you to go and read that because she probably puts it more eloquently than I am now. But it is essentially about there's a difference between obviously Afghanistan haven't made huge progress in women's cricket of late, but there has been some progress, and it's a difference between going, okay, well, we accept slow progress versus we accept no progress whatsoever and even a backward step where you just say to people who previously were playing for the women's team, oh, well, just push off then. And that those things feel quite different to me. And actually there was a really good tweet from Joel Emonson basically saying, why don't you ask Gideon how he would feel if men's cricket was banned but women were allowed to play? And I think that actually, if you are one of those people who's thinking you're kind of agreeing with what Gideon Haigh is saying, or if Gideon Haigh happens to be watching this video, think about it from that perspective. How would you feel? How would that make you feel? Like, turn it on its head, and I think that can be quite a helpful way of kind of checking your own privilege there as a man who has largely covered men's cricket and perhaps largely interested in men's cricket. There does seem a certain amount of irony, perhaps, I don't know if this is even a fair comparison, but in somebody or kind of men's cricket journalists being totally up in arms about the fact that the Afghanistan men's team won't get to play a test, which is obviously a really treasured format, yet have done literally nothing to support women's test cricket as it's gradually declined over the last 10 years. Anyway, so those are some of our thoughts on that. I'm sure that there'll be plenty of debate raging. Do comment below the Vodcast as ever. We're really keen to hear your views and carry on the conversation. We'll be out and about, no doubt, next week somewhere for next week's Vodcast. But for now, goodbye.